Montana Territory, 1883. The snow-capped peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains stood sentinel over the valley where Quinn Jameson guided his horse through the swaying grass. At 25, he'd already made a name for himself as one of the most capable hands at the Rocking M Ranch, though he carried the weight of a belief that had settled into his bones like the Montana winter. A real cowboy needed nothing but his horse, his skill, and the vast emptiness of the frontier. Attachments were dangerous in a land where nature and man alike could take everything without warning. "No point in building what you can't protect," Quinn muttered to his chestnut gelding as they crested a rise overlooking the sprawling ranch buildings. 6 years on the frontier had taught him that lesson well enough. He'd watched good men die from Indian raids in the early days, seen others lose everything to blizzards, drought, or rustlers. His own father had died chasing a dream of Western prosperity, leaving behind nothing but debts and a shattered family. Quinn had promised himself he wouldn't make the same mistake. The late afternoon sun glinted off his sandy blonde hair as he adjusted his hat. His lean frame moved with the easy confidence of a man who spent more time in the saddle than on his feet. Blue eyes, sharp as a Montana sky, scanned the horizon, always watching, always ready. That vigilance had kept him alive this long. "Quinn," the shout came from the bunkhouse porch where Micah Rourke waved him down. At 27, Micah was Quinn's best friend and the son of the ranch owner. They'd ridden together for 5 years now, facing down everything the territory could throw at them. Quinn dismounted, his boots hitting the packed earth with practiced ease. Trails clear all the way to the North Ridge, no sign of those missing calves. "Pa's worried they're being picked off by that mountain lion again," Micah said, offering Quinn a cup of coffee. "Listen, I've been meaning to ask you something. My sister Lorelai is coming back from Boston next week, finishing school's finally done with her." Quinn vaguely remembered Lorelai Rourke, a gangly girl of 16 when he'd first started at the ranch. Mr. Rourke had sent her east 2 years ago to become a proper lady, something their mother had insisted on before her passing. Quinn had barely spoken 10 words to her back then. "That's good news for your pa," Quinn said, sipping the bitter coffee. "He's missed her something fierce." "There's going to be a welcome home dance at the town hall," Micah continued. "Pa's inviting the whole county. I was hoping you'd be there. Been too long since you've done anything but work yourself to the bone." Quinn stiffened. "Dances aren't my affair. Someone needs to watch the herd." "Always an excuse," Micah shook his head. "One day you'll realize there's more to life than just surviving it, Quinn." As he walked his horse to the stable, Quinn pushed away the discomfort of Micah's words. The frontier was no place for fancy dances or soft feelings. A man who lowered his guard might as well paint a target on his back. That's how his father had ended up face-down in Wyoming mud with a bullet hole where his dreams used to be. The following days passed in the rhythm of ranch work, mending fences, moving cattle to fresher pasture, breaking in a new colt with a stubborn streak. Quinn threw himself into the labor, finding comfort in the simplicity of it. Yet Micah's words lingered, an irritating burr beneath his saddle. Friday morning dawned clear and cool. Quinn was inspecting a section of fence when he heard the approaching wagon. He straightened, shielding his eyes against the sun. The Rourke family buggy was coming up the road from town, Mr. Rourke at the reins with Micah riding alongside. A woman sat beside the elder Rourke, her face obscured by a fashionable bonnet. Quinn turned back to his work, hammering a loose board with perhaps more force than necessary. The sound of feminine laughter drifted across the field, unexpectedly drawing his attention again. The buggy had stopped at the main house, and the woman was being helped down by Micah. Her dress was a soft blue that caught the sunlight, her dark brown hair styled in a way he'd never seen on the frontier women he encountered. "Quinn," Micah called, waving him over. "Come say hello." Reluctantly, Quinn set down his tools and crossed the field. As he drew closer, the woman turned, and something in Quinn's chest tightened unexpectedly. This couldn't be the awkward girl he barely remembered. This woman stood with a graceful confidence, her face alight with joy as she took in the ranch. Her eyes were a striking hazel that seemed to shift between green and gold in the sunlight. "Quinn Jameson," Mr. Rourke said proudly. "You remember my daughter Lorelai. She's finally come home to us." Lorelai Rourke, 19 years old and nothing like the girl who had left, extended her gloved hand. "Mr. Jameson." "It's been quite some time." "Miss Rourke," Quinn managed, suddenly aware of his dirt-streaked clothes and unshaven face. He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair in need of a trim. "Welcome home. Her smile was warm, genuine in a way that made him uncomfortable. Thank you. It seems so much has changed, yet everything feels wonderfully familiar. Not much changes out here, Quinn said, retreating behind the polite distance he maintained with everyone. If you'll excuse me, there's fencing needs mending before sundown. He felt her eyes follow him as he walked away, and something about that gaze made him quicken his stride. That evening in the bunkhouse, Micah couldn't stop talking about his sister's return. You should have seen the looks on those Boston boys' faces when Pa and I showed up to escort her home. They were circling like wolves, but she wasn't having any of it. Said she'd had enough of city men with soft hands and softer spines. She'll find no shortage of hard work here, Quinn commented, cleaning his saddle by lantern light. She's tougher than you think, Micah said. Always has been. That finishing school didn't change her as much as Pa feared. First thing she asked was if her old mare was still in the stable. Quinn found himself wondering what else about Lorelai Rourke remained unchanged beneath the polished exterior. Not that it mattered to him. The ranch was big enough that their paths needn't cross often. He was wrong. The next morning, Quinn was leading his horse from the stable when Lorelai appeared, dressed in a practical riding skirt and blouse, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. The transformation from yesterday's refined lady was startling. "Mr. Jameson," she called, striding toward him with purpose. "Micah says you're checking the south pasture today." Quinn nodded warily. "That's right. I'd like to join you if you don't mind. I've been away too long. I need to reacquaint myself with every inch of this ranch." "It's rough country, Miss Rourke," Quinn said, eyeing her skeptically. "And I ride fast." A flicker of determination crossed her face. "I grew up on this land, Mr. Jameson. I may have been in Boston, but I haven't forgotten how to stay on a horse." Before he could formulate another objection, Micah appeared from the ranch house. "Take her along, Quinn. She's been pestering me since sunrise, and I've got to ride into town for supplies." Trapped, Quinn gave a curt nod. "Be ready in 5 minutes or I'm leaving without you." To his surprise, she was mounted and waiting when he returned. Her mare, a dappled gray, pranced eagerly beneath her. "I've been ready, Mr. Jameson." They rode in silence at first, Quinn setting a challenging pace across the rolling grassland. He expected complaints or requests to slow down, but Lorelai matched him stride for stride, her posture in the saddle speaking of more than just finishing school lessons. When they reached a creek that cut across the property, Quinn dismounted to let the horses drink. Lorelai slid gracefully from her saddle, removing her gloves and kneeling to splash water on her face. "You ride well," Quinn admitted grudgingly. "Better than most men I've worked with." She looked up at him, droplets of water clinging to her lashes. "My father didn't raise me to be delicate, Mr. Jameson. The lessons that matter most I learned right here, not in Boston." "Then why go at all?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Lorelai's expression softened. "A promise to my mother. She wanted me to have choices she never did." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "But I always knew I'd come back. This is home." There was something in the way she said home that struck Quinn. It had been years since he'd used that word for anywhere. "Your brother says there's to be a dance," he said, changing the subject. "Yes, Saturday next," she replied, remounting her horse with practiced ease. "Will you attend?" "I don't dance, Miss Rourke." Her eyes held his for a moment too long. "Everyone can dance, Mr. Jameson. Some just choose not to." The rest of the ride was spent discussing the ranch operations, Lorelai asking surprisingly knowledgeable questions about the cattle, the grazing patterns, and the new breeding stock her father had acquired. By the time they returned to the ranch house, Quinn found himself reluctantly impressed. "Thank you for the company, Mr. Jameson," she said as they parted at the stables. "Quinn," he corrected without thinking. "Just Quinn is fine." Her smile brightened. "Then you must call me Lorelai." He watched her walk toward the main house, a strange unease settling in his chest. People who got too close became people you could lose. It was a lesson the frontier had taught him well, and one he didn't intend to forget, no matter how intriguing Micah's sister might be. The week leading up to the dance found Quinn inventing reasons to be far from the main house, volunteering for the most distant patrols and the longest rides. Yet somehow Lorelai Rourke kept appearing in his path, helping with the morning feeding, discussing cattle prices with her father when Quinn came to report, or simply riding out to deliver lunch to the men working the far pastures. Each encounter left Quinn more unsettled than the last. She was nothing like the Eastern ladies he occasionally saw in town, with their affected mannerisms and impractical ways. Lorelai moved between worlds with an easy grace, as comfortable discussing literature as she was helping deliver a difficult calf, which she'd done alongside Quinn on Thursday morning without a moment's hesitation. "You're avoiding my sister," Micah accused on Friday evening as they repaired tack in the stable. "I'm doing my job," Quinn retorted. "She's asked about you," Micah continued, a knowing look in his eyes. "Wanted to know why a man like you keeps so much to himself." "And what did you tell her?" "That you've got it in your head that caring for anything beyond your next meal and your horse is asking for trouble." Micah tested the leather strap he was mending. "Told her how your pa died, how it left you thinking the only way to live out here is to live apart." Quinn's hands stilled. "That wasn't your story to tell." "Maybe not," Micah admitted. "But she deserved some explanation for why you look at her like she's both fascinating and frightening at the same time." "I don't," Quinn started, then stopped. There was no point denying what they both knew was true. "The dance is tomorrow night," Micah said, changing tactics. "Pa would take it as a personal slight if you didn't show. The whole ranch is going." Quinn sighed, knowing he was cornered. "Fine. I'll make an appearance." "Wear something clean," Micah grinned, "and for God's sake shave that stubble." Saturday evening arrived with unusual clarity for late spring. The town of Silver Creek, normally quiet by sundown, hummed with activity as lanterns were strung across the town hall's porch and musicians tuned their instruments inside. Quinn stood before the small mirror in the bunkhouse, hardly recognizing the man who stared back. He'd bathed thoroughly, shaved his face clean, and donned his rarely worn Sunday clothes, dark trousers, a clean white shirt, and a black vest that had belonged to his father. His fair hair was combed neatly, and the man in the mirror looked younger, less hardened than the one who usually gazed back at him. "Well, I'll be damned," Micah said from the doorway. There was a gentleman hiding under all that trailed dust after all. Quinn scowled, immediately uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "Let's get this over with." They rode into town with the other ranch hands, all unusually clean and subdued in their nervousness. Silver Creek's town hall was already filling with people from the surrounding ranches and farms, the music spilling out onto the street where couples too shy or too old to dance gathered to socialize. Inside, the hall had been transformed. Lanterns cast a warm glow over the wooden floor, cleared for dancing. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small band of fiddle, guitar, and piano filled the room with lively music. Quinn moved to the far corner, seeking the shadows as he surveyed the crowd. Then the door opened, and the Rourke family entered. Mr. Rourke looked uncommonly dignified in his best suit, but it was Lorelai who drew every eye in the room. Her dress was the deep green of pine needles, simply cut but elegantly fitted to her slender form. Her dark brown hair was arranged in loose curls that framed her face, adorned with a single emerald ribbon that matched her dress. At 19, she carried herself with a confidence that belied her years. Quinn couldn't look away. In that moment, something shifted in his understanding of the world. This wasn't Micah's gangly little sister, or even the composed young woman who had returned from Boston. This was Lorelai Rourke, suddenly and completely seen for the first time. She scanned the room, greeting neighbors and friends with warm smiles. Then her hazel eyes found Quinn in his corner, and her smile changed, became something meant only for him. She began making her way through the crowd in his direction. "You came," she said when she reached him, her voice carrying a note of pleased surprise. "And you clean up remarkably well, Quinn Jameson." "As do you," he managed, his throat inexplicably dry. "That is, you look very nice, Miss Rourke." "Lorelai," she corrected, eyes twinkling. "We had an agreement, remember." Before he could respond, the music changed to a waltz, and Micah appeared at his sister's side. "May I have this dance, little sister?" Micah asked with exaggerated formality. "Of course," Lorelai laughed, but her eyes lingered on Quinn as Micah led her away. Quinn watched them join the other couples on the floor, Lorelai moving with natural grace through the steps of the waltz. He tried to recapture the comfortable detachment that had served him so well, but it slipped through his fingers like water. "She's something, isn't she?" Mr. Rourke's voice startled Quinn from his thoughts. "Sir." "My Lorelai," the older man said, nodding toward his daughter, "sent her east to become a lady, but she came back a woman who knows her own mind. Her mother would have been proud." He studied Quinn with knowing eyes. She's been asking about you all week. Quinn shifted uncomfortably. I'm just one of your hands, sir. You're a good deal more than that, son, and we both know it. Mr. Rourke clapped him on the shoulder. I've watched you these past years. You work harder than any two men, never complain, never ask for more than your due, but you hold yourself apart, like a man afraid of what might happen if he lets down his guard. The frontier isn't kind to those who drop their defenses, Quinn said quietly. True enough, Mr. Rourke conceded, but a life without connections isn't much of a life at all. He nodded toward the dancers again. The song's ending. If you've got any sense, you'll ask her for the next one. Before Quinn could formulate a response, Mr. Rourke moved away, leaving him with a decision to make. The waltz was indeed ending, couples bowing and curtsying as the last notes faded. Lorelai thanked her brother and turned, her eyes finding Quinn again across the room. Something in that gaze propelled him forward before he could second-guess himself. He crossed the floor with long strides, arriving at her side just as the musicians struck up a lively reel. Would you, Quinn began awkwardly, that is, may I have this dance? Her face lit with a smile that made his heart stutter. I thought you didn't dance. I don't, he admitted. But I'm willing to try. She placed her hand in his, and the simple touch sent a jolt through him like summer lightning. Then I'd be honored to teach you. The dance was fast-paced and required more coordination than Quinn possessed, but Lorelai guided him through it with gentle pressure and quiet instructions. He stepped on her toes twice, apologizing profusely each time, but she only laughed. You're doing wonderfully for a beginner, she assured him. By the third song, Quinn had found his rhythm, and when the music slowed to another waltz, he found himself drawing her closer, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers as they moved in perfect synchrony. You lied to me, Lorelai said softly, looking up at him through dark lashes. You can dance after all. Only with the right partner, it seems, Quinn replied, surprised by his own boldness. Around them the room seemed to fade, the other dancers, the watching townsfolk, even the music became distant and unimportant. There was only Lorelai, her hand warm in his, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. When I left for Boston, she said quietly, you barely looked at me. I was a fool, he answered simply. Her smile was worth every moment of discomfort he'd felt that evening. Better late than never, Quinn Jameson. As the evening progressed, Quinn found himself reluctant to relinquish Lorelai to other partners, though propriety demanded he do so. He watched from the sidelines as she danced with neighboring ranchers' sons and town merchants, her laughter carrying across the room. Each time, however, she returned to him, accepting his awkward invitations with a warmth that made him forget why he'd ever thought keeping his distance was wise. The night air had cooled considerably when they finally stepped outside. Most of the ranch hands had already started back, but Micah had arranged for the Rourke buggy to remain in town. Would you care to walk for a bit? Lorelai asked as the music behind them softened with the late hour. It's such a beautiful night. Quinn nodded, offering his arm. They strolled down Silver Creek's main street, past darkened storefronts and toward the small church that marked the edge of town. The stars overhead were brilliant pinpoints in the clear Montana sky. I missed this, Lorelai said, her face tilted upward. In Boston, the gas lamps and coal smoke hide most of the stars. I used to sneak onto the school roof, just to see what few I could find. Weren't you afraid of falling? Quinn asked, imagining her balance precariously on some eastern building. She laughed. After growing up climbing barn rafters and creek bluffs, hardly, her expression grew thoughtful, though I was afraid of many other things. Like what? Quinn found himself genuinely curious about her time away. That I'd forget how to be myself. That I'd become so polished and proper that I wouldn't fit here anymore. She looked at him directly. That when I returned, everything I loved would have changed beyond recognition. There was a question in her eyes that made Quinn's pulse quicken. And has it? Some things have changed, she admitted, but in ways I never expected. They had reached the small church, its white steeple silvered by moonlight. Lorelai stopped, turning to face him fully. Micah told me about your father, she said softly, about why you keep everyone at arm's length. Quinn stiffened. Micah talks too much. He cares about you, she countered. We all do. Caring is dangerous out here, Quinn said, the words automatic, a defense he'd repeated to himself for years. More dangerous than being alone, Lorelai challenged. then missing all the moments that make life worth the risk. Her words struck at something deep within him, a truth he'd been avoiding since the day they'd buried his father. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, yes, but facing it alone had been his choice, not a necessity. I don't know how to be any other way anymore, he admitted. Yes, you do, she said, stepping closer. I saw it tonight when you danced. When you laughed, the man who enjoys life is still in there, Quinn. He's just been hiding for a very long time. In the moonlight, her face was both familiar and new, like a landscape he'd passed 100 times but never truly seen. Without conscious thought, Quinn reached up to brush a stray curl from her cheek, his fingers lingering against her skin. Lorelai, he began, not entirely sure what he meant to say. The moment was shattered by the pounding of hooves. A rider came tearing down the main street, his horse lathered and heaving. Quinn instinctively moved Lorelai behind him as the rider pulled up sharply before them. Quinn. Thank God, the man gasped, one of the younger hands from the rocking M fire at the ranch. Lightning strike hit the south barn. Mr. Rourke sent me to fetch help. The world snapped back into focus with terrifying clarity. Are the horses out? Quinn demanded. Working on it when I left. The men are trying to keep it from spreading to the house, but the wind's picking up. Get to the dance hall, Quinn ordered. Round up every able-bodied man. He turned to Lorelai, whose face had gone pale. Stay in town. I'll come for you when it's safe. No, she said firmly, already gathering her skirts. That's my home, I'm coming with you. There was no time to argue. Quinn helped her onto his horse, swinging up behind her. They galloped through the darkness, the glow of the fire visible from miles away as an angry orange smear against the night sky. Behind them, more riders thundered down the road as the men from the dance responded to the alarm. The scene at the ranch was chaos. The south barn, used for hay storage and equipment, was fully engulfed. Men formed a bucket line from the well to the main house, dousing the roof to prevent embers from igniting the wooden shingles. Cattle in the nearby corrals bellowed in panic, pressing against the fences. Quinn slid from the horse, lifting Lorelai down after him. Get to the house, he shouted over the roar of the flames. Instead, she hiked up her beautiful green dress, knotting it above her ankles. The horses, she said, pointing to the main stable where several animals remained, wild-eyed with fear. Without waiting for his response, she ran toward them. For a heartbeat, Quinn was paralyzed by the sight of her silhouette against the inferno, running toward danger rather than away. It struck him with sudden, crystal clarity. This was what it meant to care, to have something worth fighting for. The fear wasn't in the attachment, it was in the possibility of never having it at all. He sprinted after her, reaching the stable as she was already leading two nervous horses out by their halters. Get them to the north pasture, he ordered, rushing inside for the others. The next hours passed in a blur of smoke, heat, and desperate activity. The men from town arrived, bringing more hands for the bucket line and helping to secure the panicked livestock. By dawn, the south barn was nothing but smoldering ruins, but the fire had been contained. The main house, the bunkhouse, and most importantly, the family that called the Rocking M home, were safe. Quinn found Lorelai sitting on the porch steps as the first light of day crept over the eastern mountains. Her fine dress was smoke-stained and torn, her face streaked with soot, her hair falling from its elegant arrangement. To Quinn, she had never looked more beautiful. You should have stayed in town, he said, sitting beside her. His own clothes were ruined, his hands blistered from handling hot buckets and moving burning debris. And amidst all this excitement, her attempt at lightness faltered as she surveyed the damage. We could have lost everything. But we didn't, Quinn said, the word "we" slipping out naturally. Your father says the barn can be rebuilt. No lives were lost, human or animal. She turned to look at him, exhaustion evident in her face. You were magnificent out there, fearless. Quinn shook his head, not fearless, terrified actually. He took a deep breath. When I saw you run toward that stable, I realized something I've been fighting for a long time. What's that? She asked softly. That some things are worth the risk of losing them. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with her smoke-stained ones. Some people are worth the fear. The sun crested the mountains, painting the valley in gold and catching in Lorelai's eyes as she smiled up at him. It took a dance and a fire to make you see me, she teased gently. What will it take to make you kiss me, Quinn Jameson? His answer was to lean forward, closing the distance between them. Her lips were soft against his, tasting of smoke and promise. When they parted, Quinn felt as though something long broken inside him had finally begun to heal. "I've been a fool," he murmured. Lorelai laughed, the sound washing away the last of the night's terror. "Yes, but you're learning." The weeks that followed the fire brought changes to the Rocking M Ranch. The south barn was rebuilt, larger and sturdier than before. Quinn, at Mr. Rourke's insistence, moved from the bunkhouse to a small cabin closer to the main house, befitting a foreman, the older man had said with a knowing smile. For Quinn Jameson, however, the greatest change was within. The walls he had built to protect himself gradually crumbled in the face of Lorelai's patient determination. Each day brought new discoveries, that laughter could come easily again, that sharing burdens made them lighter, that the frontier's harshness was more bearable when faced together. By midsummer, when the rebuilt barn was celebrated with another dance, no one in Silver Creek was surprised to see Quinn lead Lorelai onto the floor for every song. Nor were they shocked when, under the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, he asked for her hand in marriage. "Are you certain?" Lorelai asked, her eyes searching his. "The frontier is still dangerous. There will be hard years ahead, drought and blizzards, and who knows what else." "I'm certain of you," Quinn answered simply. "Everything else we'll face together." They were married in Silver Creek's little white church, when autumn painted the Bitterroot Mountains in gold and crimson. As Quinn stood beside his bride, watching her father place her hand in his, he thought about the beliefs that had guided him for so long. The frontier was still unpredictable, still capable of taking everything in an instant. But he understood now what his father never had, that true strength came not from isolation, but from the connections that gave life meaning. The land remained unchanged, vast, beautiful, and unforgiving. But Quinn Jameson was no longer the same man who had ridden fence lines alone, believing solitude was the price of survival. Under the big Montana sky, he had found something worth far more than mere survival. He had found a home, not in a place, but in a person, in Lorelai Rourke Jameson, who had been beside him all along, waiting only to be seen. By the following spring, when the first calves were born and new grass carpeted the valley, Quinn and Lorelai had established their own small cabin on the northern edge of Rourke land, a wedding gift from her father. From their porch they could see the entire sweep of the ranch, from the rebuilt barn to the distant mountains. "Any regrets?" Lorelai asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire and gold. Quinn pulled her closer, one hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her stomach, where their child grew, the next generation of the legacy they were building together. "Only that it took me so long to see what was right in front of me." She smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Better late than never, Quinn Jameson." And as the stars emerged one by one above the Montana frontier, the same stars she had sought from Boston rooftops, Quinn knew with absolute certainty that some risks were worth taking, some loves worth fighting for. The false belief that had shaped his life for so long had finally given way to greater truth, that in finding Lorelai, he had finally found himself.